Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
You know, Brad, I'm Brad, you're John. John, good thing we don't work at News Talk STL because you know what?
What's that?
Jeff Allen would fire us in a bloodbath. I mean, you and I would just be like blood all over the floors. We'd be gone over there.
Think of the severance we would get, Brad. Think of the severance we could have.
We'd get a kick in the butt on the way out the door.
I think so.
That's the severance we would get. We talked about a lot of things this morning. We talked about, and if you know what we're referencing, this whole crazy. Excuse me. Where was it that he gave the speech?
He was in Dayton, Ohio.
That's right. He was in Dayton, Ohio, and he referred to the Chinese automakers coming to the United States. You know, the crazy thing about this is, the more I read about this, and I find this a fascinating topic because I've been an automotive guy for a long time. And once again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm an anti-electric car guy. Through my years, I've always been fascinated by electric cars. I think I told the story one time. There used to be this guy we'd had on the air when I was doing the show with Justin Maxim Alferman, and a long time ago. Did you get
Justin Maxim Alferman?
Where it was a local guy in Washington, and he had a Porsche. I think it was like an old Porsche 914, if you know what the 914s were. And he had taken the engine out and he put an electric motor in. He did this all himself. And it was fascinating that he was able to do this, but yet he had a very limited range. I mean, this is probably, 15, 18 years ago. The thing could only go 30 or 40 miles max. And that was, hold on a minute. Having problems with my voice this morning. And that was pretty much on flat terrain, if any kind of hills or anything like that. And once again, what people don't realize is it has to do with temperature and all that kind of stuff as well too. So I've always found the electric car fascinating, but the problem with it is it's sort of like if you were going to drive cross country and you were going to take your wife and your 4 kids, you would not want to go in a 2-seat sports car. You would not want to do that in a Corvette because A, it would be impractical because there's not enough seats, okay? So in other words, cars had different purposes. If you're a real estate agent and you are showing property all the time, you want to have a nice, big, comfy car, an SUV, so you can pick up your clients, you can pick up, Mr. and Mrs. Smith that you're going to take a look at a house on Mockingbird Lane and their 2 kids, and you can drive them around. So there are different cars for different purposes. Guys who work in construction, they drive pickup trucks for a reason. Guys who work in delivery, like if you're an Amazon kind of driver and you have your own vehicle, you have a certain kind of vehicle. Essentially, what the government wants to do is one size fits all, which essentially is electric. And it just isn't practical. And more stuff comes out all the time that the majority of the components will be, as far as the electrical components, would be manufactured in China. And not only that, is it takes far fewer people to put together an electric car than it does an internal combustion engine car, the typical ICE cars. And yet somebody the other day I heard talking about this, exactly what I've talked about numerous times. Guess what? The electric grid is not set up for everybody charging their cars. And not only that, if you live in a condo, if you live in like an apartment complex, how are you going to charge your car?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Now, but so Brad, isn't so let me play socialist here for a minute. Let me play socialist Californian here. If the California law is 2035, right? All new cars in California, is it 2035?
I believe that's what it is. Yes, they
okay,
can't.
So if I'm California or I'm a socialist or somewhere in between, I say, look, that's 10 years from now. That's plenty of time for automakers to figure it out. And it also puts the impetus on the federal government, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Robert Kennedy or whoever, to figure it out, pay for more electrification, use the public money for the public good, create more electric vehicle charging stations every 10 miles on American highways, we could do it, Brad. It's kind of like what the reparations people say about COVID. Remember, Hakeem Jeffries says, look, we were able to print a ton of money and give it to people during COVID. We can print a ton of money and give it to people for reparations. Same thing, Brad. We could print a ton of money and give it to people and have a charging station every 10 miles along along I-70 and I-44 and everywhere else, Brad.
Well, the problem with that is that do you want to go to, like, let's say you go to, I kid about the fact that if you're a Simpsons fan, they call it Quickie Mart, but let's take Quick Trip, for example, okay? The Quick Trip stores are run very efficiently. I'm always impressed when I go into Quick Trip. They're always clean. They're always well stocked. The people that work there are usually very helpful, very friendly. Okay, as opposed to going to the DMV. Now, I know most of those are privately owned as well too, but you just don't get the same level of service as you do at Quick Trip. Get what I'm saying?
Of course not. Yeah.
And I think that's what. Hold on a minute. I know what's going on in my voice this morning. I'm just having a hell of a time with it. I think that's what bothers me about the whole situation is the government running the charging stations, the whole bit. Now, not only that, is that exactly what you said that Hakeem Jeffries talks about. Well, look what the COVID, we threw this money, and look what the ramifications we've had after that. Rampant inflation. Because of the fact that you throw too much money into it. It's just like right now, for example, we talked about real estate agents last break, okay? There are two classes of people trying to buy houses. Let's put it this way. There's one class of people trying to buy a house, and there's another class of people who are buying houses. You know what the two basic differences are?
What's that?
The people trying to buy houses are trying to get financing, which is getting more difficult all the time and more costly because the interest rates are up. The people who are actually buying real estate got cash. And they're writing a check, or not necessarily writing a check. Well, technically, I always get mad about that.
Writing a check, yeah.
But it's not cash. You don't show up for cash with cash in a briefcase, which is when someone says, I want cash, that means $100 bills in a briefcase.
Agree with you completely, but go ahead.
But the whole idea is that the people who got money in their pockets are controlling the real estate industry. Now, the crazy thing about this is they keep talking about the real estate bubble going to burst because there's going to be people who are the people who have money are going to essentially have relocated, and they don't care about refinancing because of the fact that they're just writing a check and they don't care about getting approval from a bank or anything like that. The same thing is happening in the car business. Do you know about this?
No, I don't.
Well, the high-end cars, which were very popular after the pandemic, especially the high-end electric cars. We talked about this yesterday, where if you go to, I think it's still there I think I saw it I drove through there and I saw it with my own eyes on Sunday. There's 200 plus Teslas sitting in the parking lot at the Chesterfield Mall. Obviously, there's nobody at Chesterfield Mall. There's a couple stores still.
Well, there's a pickleball court, Brad. Come on. Maybe some of the Teslas belong to the pickleballers.
Okay, so what's happened is the people with money have already bought all the Teslas and all the Lightnings and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I watched a video last night of this guy, this car dealer I follow. He's up in New Hampshire, and he bought one of the Audi e-trons, and he's only had it for a year. He's only put 10,000 miles on it. And the sticker price on the car was $103,000. He put it through the auction with a reserve, and the top bid he got was $45,000. Now,
I completely believe it. Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. You buy a car for $103,000. He didn't pay that. I think he paid like $97,000 or $98,000. So he pays $100,000. He drives it for a year, puts 10,000 miles on it, and can't sell it at a dealer auction for, and I think his reserve was like $70,000, something like that. He didn't even come close because the people know, that the dealers know the market has sort of crashed. And
it has.
I read a story over the weekend that talked about that secretly all the automotive manufacturers are going back to the drawing board and go, okay, how quick can we grind out a bunch of hybrids, because they think that's the future. Now, I read an article.
And you're a hybrid guy. You talked about it on the show yesterday. Like, you think that's the most sensible solution is to make hybrids.
But see, the problem is you enter into a lot more complexity because essentially you're dealing with two different systems. You're dealing with an engine and you're dealing with, an internal combustion engine. You're dealing with an electric motor, and essentially they have to be compatible and they work together. Now, it's not out of the realm of possibility because Toyota's done it for a long time. With the Prius was the first one that was probably that popularized the hybrid kind of thing. And I know people that have Prius that love them. And John, I'm going to tell you right now, there's sort of a stereotype of people who drive Priuses, and you know what I'm talking about.
Of course I do. I know somebody with a Prius.
Right. Okay. Describe that person and describe if the Prius describes them.
Oh, 100%. So she is a social justice warrior, and she's a white girl who fetishizes black culture and the black struggle. And although she is very white, she's one of those people that has BLM and pronouns in her bio, Brad.
I know two people exactly like that.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, she's from 63042, Brad. She's from Hazelwood, and yet she fetishizes the BLM movement and social equity and whatever. But you're right, because you know what? We gotta do something from the earth. And I'm going to put a middle finger up to the world by driving a Prius.
Does she live in the 63042 anymore?
Well, she moved, but absolutely not. No, but you know what? She lived in the. She's one of those people that moved to the city because I believe in the city, and I don't care if my car gets broken into and I can't go out at night. I believe in the city.
I don't know. There are things right now that I look around and I think to myself, what in the world's going on? And what's interesting to me is you see things that, like, for example, there's a big controversy. You heard the Chick-fil-A controversy in New York?
No, I don't know this.
There are no Chick-fil-A stores in New York City.
Well, good. There shouldn't be. Are you kidding me? And they're a good company. Of course they're not going to open up in New York City.
Well, they are. And the controversy is that they're going to go with a totally different restaurant style. There's going to be no place to sit. Essentially, it's going to be a takeout or...
Oh, good. Well, yeah, do you want a bunch of New York City people sitting around? You want a bunch of vagrants scaring off customers?
So there's been a backlash that the reason they're doing this is because pretty much exactly what you said. They don't want to offer seating because they think it will attract the wrong clientele, which is like, okay, whatever. God, don't get me going about this.
Now, see, I agree with that. By the way, I heard a stat about this that you probably already knew, Brad. So first of all, Chick-fil-A can do whatever they want because they're a private company. They're never going to sell. They're never going to have to issue financials to Wall Street, whatever. They're never going to have to open up their decision-making process to the world and the activists and whatever. But did you know they're the number 3 chain in the United States?
Oh, yeah. And
so first of all, I knew they were big. I didn't know that they were that big. And again, we don't get to see their financials because they're private. But also, do you know that their company has grown and has had single-digit growth to somewhere like low teens growth every year, Brad? Like they're opening they have single digit to low teens expansion every year. No restaurant is doing that.
Right. And the other interesting aspect of that is, do you know the ownership structure that you can't actually own a store? Did you know this?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a deal where essentially you become, hold on just a minute. Here we go again. I do apologize. The way it works, and I'm not 100% sure of this, but you have to put in a certain amount. You have to go through a training program, the whole bit, and you put in X amount of money, but you technically don't own the store. You are the partner in the store, whatever they call it. They have a term for it. And essentially you get a piece of the action, but you don't own the store, nor the real estate, nor the franchise. It's not like with most of the other places. You've got McDonald's. And McDonald's used to own a lot of company stores. They got out of that. Matter of fact, I know that specifically there were quite a few of them in the one there at Six Flags was a company-owned store, and there are several of them on I-44. And the family out of Washington that runs the Washington McDonald's bought all those from the corporation because the corporation decided they didn't want to be necessarily in the operations end of it anymore. They just want to be in the franchising part of it. But that's the deal with Chick-fil-A. You don't actually own the store. Now, the thing that I find fascinating is Chick-fil-A and also one of my other favorite places is Culver's, okay? How do they find the people that work there? Because there are certain restaurants that I can go to, certain drive-thrus I can go to that I can tell you that they are not going to be able to understand a word I say.
Absolutely. Of course not.
You know,
And the people that work at Chick-fil-A are a different brand of employee.
they are. It's like, where do they get them from? Do they manufacture them? Are they coming out of a machine or something like that?
Hey, two things about Chick-fil-A that listeners might not know. Do you know if you order a kids meal there, you take the kids, they come with like a little coloring book, like an activity thing that the kids can look at while you're waiting for food. Do you know that if you don't open it, like, if you go there every 2 weeks, your kids are going to have a couple of the same book. If you don't want the book, you can exchange the book for an ice cream cone. Did you know that, Brad?
Really?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And what I thought it was so brilliant about it is Chick-fil-A gets their activity book back. You're not just taking a ton of activity books, coloring books, whatever, little games, and throwing them in the trash can that are going in the landfill. So you take it back up to the counter if your kids don't want it, or from the beginning. And Brad, I'm not talking a little like soft serve tiny cone. You get a big ice cream cone that your kids will probably not finish. It's fantastic. But that's just another example. And I wouldn't know that. Here's a great point, Brad. I wouldn't know that except for the fact that a nice lady came up to me and said, hey, if you don't want that book, if your kids aren't going to use their books, I'll give them ice cream cones. You'll trade them in. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, what a deal.
Finish up the story this morning. I'm just scrolling through a couple different.
Hey, I have one more Chick-fil-A anecdote. You ready?
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A is a private company. If you believe in Chick-fil-A and you see their rapid expansion, do you know how you can be long Chick-fil-A, Brad?
How's that?
You're long Lancaster Colony. Lancaster Colony makes all the sauces and all the accoutrements for Chick-fil-A. So a sneaky way to be long Chick-fil-A, if you believe in their business and their model and you see their expansion, be long Lancaster Colony.
So, and what John says, and for you stock market people, when John says long, that means you buy the stock and you hold it, which you think is going to appreciate. If you are shorting a company, that means you think they're going to go into the toilet. Am I pretty much correct on that, John?
That's exactly right. And by the way, we talked about one stock yesterday, Tesla. Tesla is down 35% year to date, Brad. Lancaster Colony, who makes the delicious Chick-fil-A barbecue sauce, up 19%. That's what we call a divergence, Brad. That's what we call a divergence in performance. I'm a Tesla fan. I love Tesla. I'm going to buy their stock. It's a good idea. Wrong. Buy something boring like Lancaster Colony, up 19% this year. This is not financial advice. And for financial advice, you should go to edwardjones.com/Mike McGee, who sponsors Westplex 1071.
MCGHEE. Are you there?
I'm here, Brad.
I said MCGHEE, remember?
MCGHEE, that's right. That's Mike McGee.
Okay, last thing, the show, I'm doing a little scanning, and I came across a story. I just saw this pop up. I'll give you the headline. Teen Kaylee Gaines, still unconscious, suffering fractured skull after attack. Sad, 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 sad. And
it is, and the attacker's attorney is in the Post-Dispatch story. You can find that at johncombest.com. The attacker's attorney says, we're going to tell our side of the story, but for right now, everybody pray for Kaylee.
Man, I don't know what to say about that. What is their side of the story? Do you have 30 seconds you could
Yeah, absolutely. Their side of the story is that Kaylee brought the fight on. I mean, she swung first, according to internet sleuths. And according to unverified reports, Kaylee had either complained about bullying or had been a bully herself. They're going to say that Marnice DeClue, who the New York Daily News reported as the attacker, was just defending herself, Brad. When she was smashing Kaylee's head against the ground, she was just defending herself.
Okay, enough said on that. And you can go to the GoFundMe sites, and not to pat myself on the back, but I've been there, I've donated, and you can just search Kaylee Gain, KayleeGain, it'll come right up. John, we'll talk tomorrow.
Goodbye.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?